Let's turn, shall we, to the front page of the Daily Telegraph, and their headline, a magnificent moment, a quote of course. But it is worth remembering that there are plenty of people in the United Kingdom for whom this moment could not have come soon enough. Indeed, the argument was that the government were dragging their feet over triggering this process. I think even Jeremy Corbyn suggested we should have fired it the day after the referendum was held.
Well, the day we listen to Jeremy Corbyn about anything is the day we all might as well go home. But it seems to me that it's happened actually remarkably quickly for something that is so historic. I mean, whether you agree with it or not, it is a historic moment. I mean, a number of papers making the point, and Theresa May herself making the point, that there is no turning back from this. Boris Johnson on the front page of the Telegraph calling it an irreversible crescendo, which makes it sound rather like a soundtrack to a horror movie. It's well covered by all of the papers. It is something that I don't think we'll ever forget in our lifetimes. We'll all remember where we were when it happened. And my only hope is, as someone who did vote for Remain, but who wants to be optimistic about the future of my country, I only hope that this magnificent moment continues to be equally magnificent when we realise there's no trade deal and actually the £350 million we were promised for the NHS every week doesn't transpire.
When it turns out that living like the rest of the world, democratic, self-governing, trading with the countries all around the world is a viable way to go. As one of the 17.4 million people who voted Leave, more people than ever voted for any person, idea or party in British democratic history, I'm delighted about this. Now, we've got to remember that while we hear various people, AC Graylings and Richard Dawkins of the world, kind of complaining on about it, they're in a minority, firstly, because there are an awful lot of people out there who really had given up faith in politics, gave it one last go, and now they get to see that they, who thought they were powerless, have made the most powerful people in the land do what they want rather than vice versa. We should also remember the Dawkins and Graylings and so on are in a minority among Remainers now, most, and they deserve credit for this, absolutely, have gone through that difficult period of defeat and have accepted, don't necessarily like the idea, but have accepted that democracy involves sometimes accepting that you don't get your way.
I mean, worth remembering as well, and this is a point I made to our economics editor, Ed Conway, just a little bit earlier on, all the projections of doom and gloom that the economy was going to go off a cliff if we voted to leave the European Union, they haven't manifested. Actually, the British economy seems to be in quite good health at the moment.
Well, I think it's too early to tell. I really do. And that's not just me.
Come on.
No, that's not just me kind of batting the question into the long grass. It really isn't. And I find it interesting that you keep talking about Dawkins and Grayling, and I feel like there is this attempt to paint Remainers as sort of fuddy-duddy, out-of-touch, pretentious elites. And I don't think that that's fair.
Absolutely not. But we've got to be clear that some people, like AC Grayling, are indeed fuddy-duddy, out-of-touch elites.
That's very unfound AC Grayling,
the majority,
who's a great philosophical thinker.
Well, he was a great philosopher. He seems to have been distinctly triggered by the triggering of Article 50 today. But the fact is, the majority of people who voted Remain have done the responsible, grown-up thing. When it comes to those forecasts, I remember we argued on this show about this just under a year ago. The Treasury was saying ridiculously that a vote to leave, not even leaving the EU, would cause instant recession, 500,000 lost jobs. Those things, people saw through them at the time, and they just haven't turned out to be true.
That's because we're still in the EU.
No, they said a vote to leave, not leaving. A vote to leave would be enough to do that. People saw through that.
Well, it did. I mean, the stock market, the pound fell against the dollar in quite a dramatic way.
Where's the recession? Where's the 500,000 jobs lost? Where's the £4,300 lost per family? These things were, unfortunately, politicised, inaccurate and unreliable, and it is early enough to judge those. Not the whole of Brexit. It's early enough to judge those short-term forecasts because they were not true.
I really hope you're right. I really do.
We already know.
Mark already knows he's right.
Before this gets more heated, let's turn, shall we, to Inside the Sun. And they have obviously decided to mock up the battle between Team Brexit and Team Brussels as a Subbuteo game. Some of the key players on both sides, those that will be sitting down, literally, around the table trying to thrash out the deal.
Here the nitty-gritty begins. Elizabeth's completely right about that. This process of back and forth in the negotiations, the incredibly technical job of disentangling law, of getting new trade arrangements and mutual recognition of standards, all that stuff. We are going to get to know some previously very obscure British officials very well in the next 2 years, and some previously incredibly obscure bureaucrats in the next couple of years, some of whom I suspect have very different views to the member states of the European Union on how this should turn out.
I mean, I just keep coming back to that fact that I read, a few months ago, just after the referendum results, where it said that an average trade deal takes sort of 9 to 12 years to negotiate. And obviously we don't have that time. We really don't. So I'm fearful. I'm fearful.
You have to admit, Mark, that the German Chancellor is saying you're not going to have parallel negotiations. Actually, you're going to have to start leaving the EU before we do anything on trade. That has to worry some within the business community.
Well, I'm sure people will be watching every word on both sides closely, but we also have to remember that these negotiations, firstly, all negotiations start off with people strutting back and forth and end up with people sitting down and talking. And also that there are domestic elections, there's other political considerations. If you look at what happened in Cameron's EU negotiation, Angela Merkel regularly said completely contradictory things based on who she was talking to, where and when. That's how politicians work. In terms of these trade deals, we do have one advantage, which is we're a member of the European Union. We have all EU regulations in our law already, so we already comply with all the standards that that our exporters would need to do in terms of mutual recognition to have a deal, which gives us a big head start.
Isn't part of the desire for Brexiteers to cut all the red tape that's hampering sort of local industry? Doesn't that mean that we'll have to dismantle those?
Of course, but here's the distinction. If you're in the EU, 100% of your economy has to follow EU regs. If you're outside the EU, only your exporters, less than 10%, have to follow them. The rest of the economy you can free up.
Let's pause there, shall we?